Welcome to True Crime Case Files. Today's episode takes us to the quiet town of Ardmore, Oklahoma, a community known for its conservative values, tight-knit families, and the kind of gossip that spreads like wildfire. Beneath the surface of this seemingly peaceful town, a tangled web of secrets and betrayals would lead to a shocking murder. David Hale was a 41-year-old man who lived in Ardmore, Oklahoma, a small town known for its conservative values and tight-knit community. He owned a successful car dealership in town, Hale Auto Sales, which had been in his family for generations. He was a well-respected businessman, known for his honesty and integrity. David was also a deacon at the local Baptist church, where he was deeply involved in community events. On the outside, David seemed like the perfect family man, hardworking, kind, and committed to his wife, Anne, and their daughter, Macy. But beneath this clean-cut image, David carried a heavy secret. For years, he struggled with his sexuality, which was at odds with the traditional values of his town and his church. This inner turmoil led him to live a double life, often traveling to Oklahoma City and Dallas for anonymous sex with other men. While he was devoted to his family in many ways, David felt emotionally distant from them, especially as his marriage to Anne had grown cold and loveless. In the years before his death, he struggled to reconcile his true sexual feelings with the life he felt obligated to lead. One of those sexual relationships was with Hunter Davis, his daughter Macy's 18-year-old boyfriend. Hunter, a high school football star, had grown close to David after Macy introduced him to the family. On the surface, David acted as a mentor to Hunter, offering him guidance, helping him find work at the dealership, and even giving him financial support. But in reality, David was using this mentorship as a way to Hunter into a secret sexual relationship with him. David's double life began to catch up with him in the summer of 2021. His daughter, Macy, had just graduated from high school and was looking forward to starting classes at a local community college. She was excited about her future and was planning to marry Hunter that fall. David, meanwhile, was struggling to keep his affair hidden while managing the growing tension in his home. Macy, always close with her father, started to notice his strange behavior but was clueless to what was really going on. In the days leading up to his death, David seemed distracted, his mind clearly on more than just his business and family obligations. He spent more time than usual in private, often taking long drives late at night or shutting himself away in his home office. His double life was finally unraveling, leading to the fateful confrontation that would cost him his life. On the morning of August 14, 2021, at around 7:00 a.m., David Hale's body was found by his daughter, Macy, in the bathroom of their home. It was a Saturday, and like many small towns, Ardmore, Oklahoma was quiet. Macy had woken up early, planning to go out for breakfast at Denny's with her boyfriend Hunter. She knocked on her father's bathroom door but got no answer. When she opened it, she was met with a horrific sight. David was lying on the cold tile floor, a pool of blood surrounding him. The bathroom mirror was splattered, and the handgun that David kept for protection was lying on the floor next to his lifeless hand. Macy screamed, dropping her phone as she stood frozen in shock. After a few moments, she ran back to her room, grabbed her phone off the floor, and called 911. Macy's voice trembled as she spoke to the dispatcher, struggling to explain what had happened. Her mind raced as she replayed the events of the last few days, trying to make sense of how her father, the man she had looked up to all her life, could now be dead. The dispatcher tried to calm her down, asking her to stay on the line until help arrived. Macy remained panicked, pacing back and forth between the bathroom and the living room, trying to catch her breath. Within minutes, the first responders arrived at the Hale residence, a modest ranch-style house on the outskirts of town. The paramedics quickly confirmed what Macy already knew: her father was dead. As the reality set in, Macy collapsed onto the front porch, tears streaming down her face. Her world had been turned upside down in an instant. News of the tragedy spread quickly throughout Ardmore. In a town where gossip moved fast, especially in the age of Facebook and local news websites, word of David Hale's death shocked the entire community. Neighbors began gathering outside the Hale house, whispering and speculating about what could have happened to the man they knew as a kind and upstanding citizen. Macy was taken to the police station shortly after her father's body was found. Still in shock, she could barely process what was happening. Her mother, Anne, had been out of town visiting her sister in Tulsa and was on her way back, completely unaware of the nightmare awaiting her. By mid-morning, the small, quiet town of Ardmore was buzzing with confusion, fear, and rumors about what had led to the death of David Hale. The Ardmore Police Department arrived on the scene around 7:30 a.m. on August 14, 2021, less than 30 minutes after Macy Hale made the frantic 911 call. Lead investigator Detective Greg Marshall, a seasoned officer with over 15 years on the force, was known for his methodical approach to crime scenes. The bathroom where David Hale's body was found was small but recently renovated, with white walls and white tile flooring. It was a mess. Blood had pooled around David's head, and splatters covered the sink, mirror, and walls. The handgun, a Smith & Wesson .38, lay on the floor near David's right hand. It was clear that David had been shot at close range. The bullet had entered his chest, leaving no chance for survival. The detectives took in the details. The rest of the house was undisturbed. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, and nothing appeared to be stolen. It seemed unlikely that this was a robbery gone wrong, especially in a town like Ardmore, where violent crime was rare. Detective Marshall knelt next to the body, noting the position of the gun and David's hand. There was no indication of a struggle in the bathroom, but something about the scene felt off to him. He and another officer to dust for fingerprints on the gun and check for any other trace evidence in the room. He also requested a thorough examination of David's phone, which was sitting on the counter next to the sink. Marshall knew that in today's world, people's phones often held secrets, and he suspected David's would be no different. As the investigation continued, the police used luminol, a chemical agent, to check for any blood traces that might have been cleaned up elsewhere in the house. The only blood present was in the bathrooms, suggesting that David had been killed there and not moved after his death. Crime scene photographers documented every angle, making sure nothing was missed. By noon, the detectives had gathered all the evidence they could from the scene. The body was taken to the local coroner for a full autopsy, which would later confirm that David had died from a single gunshot wound to the chest. As Marshall wrapped up their initial investigation, it was clear they were dealing with more than just a simple accident or home invasion. Something much more personal had happened here. Macy Hale, David's 18-year-old daughter, was the first person the police questioned. Still in shock after finding her father's body, she was taken to the Ardmore Police Department later that morning. Detective Greg Marshall knew this would be a delicate interrogation. Macy was emotional, her face pale, and her hands trembling as she sat in the small, windowless interview room. Macy was fresh out of high school with plans to start community college in the fall. She was known around town for her outgoing personality and dedication to soccer, often seen at the local field in her Adidas gear. Her relationship with her father had always seemed strong, though in recent weeks, according to friends, Macy had been quieter and more withdrawn. Detective Marshall wanted to understand why. He started the interview gently, asking Macy about her relationship with her father. Macy described her dad as a hard-working man, always at the car dealership, but still making time for Sunday dinners in church. Her voice wavered as she recalled how their relationship had recently changed. Just days before the murder, Macy had discovered something shocking that shattered her world. She had found sexually explicit messages on her boyfriend Hunter's phone, revealing an affair between Hunter and her father. Macy's discovery had left her devastated, and the detectives could see the raw emotion on her face as she talked. She felt betrayed by both men and didn't know how to handle the situation. "I just wanted things to go back to normal," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I didn't want to believe what I saw." Marshall listened carefully. The motive for Macy to be involved in her father's death was clear: anger, betrayal, and heartbreak. However, as the interrogation continued, Macy insisted that despite her rage, she would never hurt her father. Her alibi was solid, too. On the night of the murder, she had spent most of the evening with Hunter, who she still loved despite his affair with her father, and several friends had seen them together at a local ice cream shop, Brahms, a popular spot in Ardmore. Surveillance footage from the store confirmed her presence there, giving her an airtight alibi for the time of the crime. Though Macy's emotional state and recent discovery pointed to her as a potential suspect, the detectives ultimately found no physical evidence linking her to the murder. Marshall, however, couldn't shake the feeling that this family's secrets ran much deeper than they appeared. Next on the police's list of suspects was Ann Hale, David's 39-year-old wife. Ann had been married to David for 20 years and was well known in Ardmore for her deep involvement in the church and the local community. As a stay-at-home mom, she spent much of her time organizing church events, leading Bible study groups, and volunteering at the local food pantry. Outwardly, Anne appeared to have the perfect life: a loving husband, a bright daughter, and a strong reputation in their conservative town. However, as the detectives dug deeper, they uncovered cracks in her seemingly perfect marriage. Friends and neighbors described the relationship between Anne and David as strained. Over the past few years, the two had grown distant, with David spending more time at his car dealership and Anne pouring herself into church activities. It was no secret that their loveless marriage lacked the intimacy it once had. Detective Greg Marshall brought Anne in for questioning 2 days after the murder. When she walked into the police station, she looked tired and grief-stricken, her eyes red from crying. Dressed in a simple floral dress, Anne clutched a tissue in her hand as she sat down across from the investigators. At first, Anne seemed cooperative, answering questions about her husband's routine in their marriage. She admitted that things hadn't been the same between them for a long time. "We were more like roommates than husband and wife," she said, her voice breaking. "I can't remember the last time he touched me." But when the detectives brought up the affair between David and Hunter, Anne's demeanor changed. She seemed shocked at the news, almost as if she couldn't believe it. As the interrogation continued, the detectives pressed her about her whereabouts the night of the murder. Anne claimed she had been out of town visiting her sister in Tulsa and was on her way back, completely unaware of the nightmare awaiting her. Her story seemed plausible, but the police couldn't ignore the fact that Anne had a clear motive. The betrayal of both her husband and her daughter's boyfriend would be enough to push anyone over the edge. Anne's emotions were a mix of grief and anger during the interrogation. She maintained her innocence, but didn't deny that the revelation of the affair had deeply affected her. Still, like her daughter, Anne had no physical evidence linking her to the murder, and the detectives knew they needed more to definitively rule her out or confirm her involvement. On the morning of August 23, 2021, just 2 days after David Hale's murder, Ardmore detectives received a crucial break in the case. It was a humid, overcast day, with temperatures in the low 90s, and the conservative town was still buzzing with spicy gossip about the crime. At around 10 a.m., Detective Greg Marshall got a call from the forensics lab. The team had found a key piece of evidence that had been overlooked during the initial search of the Hale home. The gun used to kill David had traces of fingerprints on it, but they didn't belong to Anne or Macy. The detectives quickly returned to the Hale residence to re-examine the crime scene. The house had already been searched extensively, but this new development prompted another, more thorough inspection as they started retracing their steps through the house. The bathroom where David was found was still cordoned off, with unclean bloodstains still marking the spot where his body had been discovered. The gun, a Smith & Wesson revolver, had been carefully bagged as evidence, but now the forensic report gave them a new direction. The fingerprints on the gun matched Hunter Davis, Macy's boyfriend, who had been close to the family in many different ways for the past 2 years. This revelation raised immediate questions. Why were Hunter's prints on the gun? And what was his role in the murder? Detective Marshall recalled that during his brief initial interview, Hunter had seemed nervous but not overly suspicious. He had mentioned being with Macy at Brahm's ice cream shop that evening, where several friends had confirmed his alibi. However, the prints on the gun painted a different picture, one that placed Hunter at the crime scene. The detectives knew they had to proceed carefully. They contacted Hunter and asked him to come in for a follow-up interview. Meanwhile, they began piecing together his connection to the Hale family. David had taken Hunter under his wing, offering him a job at the dealership and financial support in exchange for illicit sex. But the discovery of the affair had turned everything upside down. The new evidence gave the detectives more questions than answers, but it was clear that Hunter's involvement was deeper than they had initially thought. As the investigation progressed, the team felt they were getting closer to uncovering the truth. For the first time since the murder, they had a tangible lead that could break the case wide open. Hey, true crime case solvers interested in more real-life murder mysteries, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. And do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Stay safe, true crime case solvers. Hunter Davis, Macy Hale's 18-year-old boyfriend, quickly became the focus of the investigation after the discovery of his fingerprints on the gun that killed David Hale. Hunter, a well-known football star at Ardmore High School, had charmed most of the town with his athletic abilities and friendly demeanor. But behind that image was a troubled young man who had grown up in a difficult home environment. His mother struggled with drug addiction, and his father had long battled alcoholism. David Hale had stepped in as a parental figure, offering Hunter a summer job at his car dealership and even giving him a place to stay when things got rough at home. When Hunter arrived at the Ardmore Police Department for his second interview, the tension in the room was palpable. Detective Greg Marshall was ready to confront him with the new evidence. Hunter looked uneasy as he sat down, his hands fidgeting on the table. Wearing a faded Sooners t-shirt and jeans, he no longer carried the confident swagger he was known for on the football field. The detectives began by asking Hunter to walk them through the night of the murder again. He repeated his story. He had been with Macy at Brahms, grabbing burgers and shakes. But when confronted with the fingerprint evidence, his face went pale. He stammered, trying to explain how his prints could have ended up on the gun, and swore he didn't kill him. The detectives pressed him further, asking about his sexual relationship with David. Hunter hesitated before admitting that David had been more than just a mentor. He was his lover. Their relationship had turned into something so intense and passionate Hunter didn't know how to handle. He felt trapped, loyal to Macy, but manipulated by David, who had both helped him financially and used him for sex. "I didn't want any of this," Hunter said, his voice cracking. As the interrogation continued, Hunter's emotional state shifted from defensive to desperate. He denied any involvement in David's death, but seemed genuinely conflicted. He insisted that he loved Macy and wanted nothing to do with David anymore, but the detectives weren't convinced. His prints on the gun and his history with David were enough to keep him under suspicion. Though Hunter's responses were emotional and at times erratic, the detectives knew they needed more concrete evidence before they could determine his true role in David's murder. For now, Hunter remained one of the prime suspects, his relationship with the victim casting a long shadow over the investigation. On August 27, 2021, just before dawn, the Ardmore Police Department at last pieced together the tragic truth. After weeks of investigation and numerous interviews, they finally identified the murderer, Macy Hale, David's 18-year-old daughter. Macy had been the last person anyone expected to commit such a crime. To the outside world, she was a bright, driven young woman with a passion for soccer and plans for college. But beneath her calm exterior, she had been harboring an overwhelming storm of anger and betrayal. The investigation turned in Macy's direction when her mother, Ann Hale, provided police with a shocking detail. Macy had discovered sexually explicit messages between her father and her boyfriend, Hunter Davis, just days before the murder. This revelation gave Macy both the motive and the means to kill her father. The police immediately re-examined Macy's alibi. She had claimed she was at Brahms, a local fast food chain, with Hunter at the time of the murder. But surveillance footage from that night told a different story. The timestamp didn't match up with the timeline Macy had given during her initial interview. That, combined with forensic evidence linking her to the scene, sealed her fate. The night of August 27, police arrived at the Hale family home, where Macy was staying with her mother. The quiet Ardmore neighborhood, known for its conservative values, was suddenly buzzing with the sight of flashing lights and officers surrounding the house. Detective Greg Marshall, who had been leading the investigation, knocked on the door. Anne answered, visibly shaken, but Macy stood behind her, her face expressionless. "Macy Hale, you are under arrest for the murder of David Hale," Marshall said calmly as he read her rights. Macy showed no visible shock. Instead, she remained eerily calm, as if she had already accepted her fate. She complied with the arrest without resistance. As Macy was handcuffed and led to the police cruiser, Ann Hale collapsed onto the front porch, sobbing uncontrollably so much she even peed herself. The reality that her own daughter had killed her husband was too much to bear. Neighbors peeked out from behind their curtains, whispering in disbelief at what had happened in their small, close-knit community. For the Hale family, life would never be the same again. The arrest brought some answers, but it left a trail of devastation in its wake. Macy Hale's trial began on August 31, 2022, in Ardmore, Oklahoma. The courtroom was packed with community members, reporters from local outlets like the Ardmore Daily, and members of the Hale family. The trial was a focal point of local news, given the shockwaves the murder had sent through this small, tight-knit town. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Granger, argued that Macy Hale had acted out of anger and betrayal. Granger, known for his meticulous approach, presented evidence showing that Macy had discovered inappropriate messages between her father, David Hale, and her boyfriend, Hunter Davis. The prosecution claimed that this discovery had pushed Macy to murder her father in a fit of rage. The key evidence included the murder weapon, David's handgun, and Macy's fingerprints on it. Granger painted a picture of a young woman overwhelmed by jealousy and heartbreak, unable to control her emotions. Macy's defense attorney, Lula Ray McDonald, a 72-year-old veteran lawyer with a reputation for defending difficult cases, argued that Macy had acted in a moment of extreme emotional distress. McDonald pointed out that Macy had no prior criminal record and had been a loving daughter before discovering the affair. She claimed that Macy's actions were the result of a severe emotional breakdown rather than premeditated murder. McDonald asked the jury to consider Macy's age and mental state when making their decision. Throughout the trial, Macy's mother, Ann Hale, sat in the courtroom, her face a mask of grief and confusion. The emotional strain was visible on her face, and she often wiped tears from her eyes. Her reaction was one of devastation, reflecting the loss of both her husband and the relationship with her daughter. Macy herself appeared somber, rarely making eye contact with the audience or her mother. On September 10, 2022, the jury returned a verdict of guilty of second-degree murder. The verdict was met with mixed reactions from the community. Some felt justice had been served, while others were saddened by the tragic outcome. The judge sentenced Macy to 25 years in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. For the Hale family, the trial marked the end of a harrowing chapter. Macy's conviction brought a sense of closure, but it also left deep wounds in the family and the community. The tragic events had forever changed the lives of everyone involved. After Macy Hale's trial, the impact on those involved was profound. Ardmore, Oklahoma, a town known for its close-knit community and traditional values, had been shaken by the murder and the subsequent legal proceedings. Macy Hale, now serving a 25-year sentence at the Mabel Bassett Correctional Center in McLeod, Oklahoma, faced a life drastically different from the one she had planned. Her time in prison was marked by isolation and regret. The once bright future she had envisioned, including her plans for college and a career, had been replaced by a harsh reality. Macy's story was widely covered in local media, including the Ardmore Daily and news stations like KXI-TV. The media coverage, while providing updates on her case, also served as a constant reminder of the tragic events and the lives changed forever. Ann Hale, David's widow, struggled to find normalcy in her life. She had to deal with the loss of her husband and the betrayal of her daughter. Ann, known for her involvement in local church activities and charity events, found solace in her faith. She continued to lead Bible study groups at the church, but did so with a heavy heart. The community rallied around her, offering support and condolences. Despite the support, Ann found it difficult to move past the betrayal and the fractured family relationships. Hunter Davis, Macy's former boyfriend, also faced significant challenges. After the murder, Hunter left Ardmore and went to live with relatives in a different state. His reputation as a high school football star was tarnished by his involvement in the scandal. Hunter attempted to rebuild his life away from the media spotlight, focusing on finding a job and starting over. However, the emotional scars from the affair and the murder remained with him, affecting his relationships and self-esteem. In summary, the lives of Macy Hale, Ann Hale, and Hunter Davis were forever altered by the murder. The community of Ardmore continued to deal with the emotional aftermath, trying to find healing in the wake of such a profound tragedy.